Hey guys, welcome back to some more videos. Now, Doom's back, finally. um, so yeah, we're having a Doom and a Nick war. Fairly simple fights I have today for the most part. I do have one fight that is, you know, a little bit dangerous, but all of the other ones are basically routine. So yeah, two Hulkling with Doom. It's pretty simple. You just want to time your L3s to not get their damage reduced by the indestructible or protection. And if you can do that successfully, you'll be good. Here, we eat a combo, which is, of course, always a good idea. Here we have to bait this in the corner since we don't have our invuln anymore. And then the indestructible triggers, and it's not a great position, but it is better to be doing this than to be dancing around the corner. So yeah, I mean we're still perfectly fine. This fight is not particularly difficult, so at this point it's basically just trying to stay calm and I'll be fine. Which as you can see is how this fight turns out. It's not that bad of a fight. No white Magneto pre-fight makes it a little bit difficult, but it's not anything I would ever be scared to take. Just gotta know how Hulkling works and be comfortable fighting him. Especially with, a non-standard counter for him. But yeah, I don't think it's too bad. As you can see, we're just killing him right here with this L3. The Mystic Powerbacks and Mystic Dispersion 5 helps a lot. That's, the main way to actually go, not super slow in this fight. It's still a slow fight, but it's not ridiculously slow. But yeah, next up we have a Killmonger. This is a simple just L3, L2, and we're going to keep the armor break up. And yeah, that is the basic idea here. Just a Killmonger, and we have armor breaks, and it's Doom. So again, super simplified. You're probably going to hear me say this a lot. With Doom being back, I'm back to taking a lot of those just nothing fights with Doom. But yeah, Killmonger, it's just a Killmonger. There is some stuff to watch out with ebb and flow shrugging debuffs, but it is really simple, to keep the armor break up with Doom, so it's not dangerous, it's just, you kind of want to pay attention to it. But yeah, as you can see here, it is pretty much just throwing a heavy to restart the ebb and flow, and not doing, hits before the heavy each time, and that sorts you out. And now that we have our L3, we're going to go for an L2, and the fight will be over. Nice and easy fight. Definitely a lot more of a chill one after, the kind of chaotic Hulkling. And yeah, the L2 just ends the fight. Next up, we have a 19 Negs. This was actually one of the fights I was a little bit more worried about. I wasn't sure how slow the tactic would make it here, since this isn't one where you're really going to be shrugging the debuffs regardless. But the tactic, it's really not a hard tactic outside of very specific scenarios. So on a node like this, the tactic is mostly meaningless, and it also gives free willpower healing, which is nice, I guess. Again, doesn't matter that much, but yeah. So, plan here, just these combos. Try and keep aggro prowess down during the glancing still. In my opinion, it's more important to get rid of those aggro prowess stacks than it is to, have less glancing throughout the fight. Probably a little bit slower this way, but I think it's worth it to get rid of those aggro prowess stacks. Because, yeah, that's really the only danger here, is if the aggro prowess stacks up too high, and then there could be some danger, but as long as you can avoid that, there's really nothing going on here. And yeah, here I'm gonna go ahead and use my L3 just for a good chunk of damage, just helps speed this up a little bit. Yeah, I mean, we're just going to finish out with combos after this. And we are going to take some dark damage from the Unsteady Ground debuff now, but we are still healing more damage than we would take. This was an R3 Sig 20, I believe it was Sig 20. So I was not worried at all about the damage with the non-damaging debuffs. Yeah, just a very easy fight. Not a quick fight by any means, but not every fight needs to be quick. Yeah. Especially when it's using such a tanky champion. You're less worried about the speed of the fight when you have someone like Nick or you have someone like Doom. But yeah, fight is now over at this point. And yeah, next up we have an infamous Iron Man with Doom. This is again a very easy fight. For these next two fights, I'm going to use a PS1 to immediately get rid of the armor nodes. And then we're going to be able to just not have to worry about armor for the rest of either of these fights. On Infamous Iron Man, there's some stuff to pay attention to with Buffet. It doesn't really matter, but it can help you end the fight quicker if you pay attention to it. I did not pop Mystic Powerbacks for these fights. I'm mostly trying to conserve Mystic Powerbacks more than I normally would. In a situation like this, before the changes to Mystic Powerbacks and Powerbacks in general, I would just pop Powerbacks for everything. But, in a fight like this where it's so easy and Mystic Powerbacks just don't matter, it's gonna be best to just conserve them at this point, in my opinion. But yeah, still, it's just an Infamous Iron Man with Doom. Really not much Infamous Iron Man can do against Doom, since he is just an absolute counter to Infamous Iron Man. And yeah, here Infamous Iron Man throws the L1. This gives me some extra Mystic Dispersion power. And I get a crit on my heavy, and I have a stagger up, so that means I'm going to nullify the regen, and the fight is just over. So yeah, now for the CGR, we are going to take some bleed damage, but it is safe, because he can only ever gain the one armor, and it only lasts for, I believe it's 15 seconds. So this fight is safe. There's just some guaranteed damage you're going to take, which is perfectly fine. So here, we do this. Admittedly, I probably should not have had the first hit connect. That allowed for some extra chance of the bleeds to happen, but it doesn't end up mattering, and yeah. Goal is mostly to just not have CGR ever throw specials because of the unsteady ground stuff. I mean, it's perfectly fine if they do. Doom is very good for this tactic, but there's just no reason to let them throw specials, so we're trying our best to avoid it. And yeah, we're at our L3 cycle now, so the fight is over at this point. But yeah. Doom Wars. Really simple. Quite excited to get back to Doom Wars. It has been a long time since I've really had big Doom Wars. This was only 4 Doom fights, so a fairly reasonable one, since I mostly just ended up going on this path for the Nick Fury fights I had. But yeah. Next up, we have this Galan. Really easy fight with Doom. I mean, not Doom, with Nick Fury. We have a damage booster pre-fight thing. It's a debuff siphoner, so my bleeds will do slightly more damage. And yeah, we're just never going to activate the regen. And the nice thing about Nick Fury for this fight that allows him to never activate that regen is that he is just so quick that you don't have to bait specials at all. And that's what makes Nick Fury so good for this node in general, is that you don't have to activate the regen at all, whereas with most camps, you do have to get into a position where you may be baiting specials or something. With Nick Fury, that's just not the case. Next up is my only real hard fight this war. It's Mephisto on 50. I was originally going to use Reed, but I realized that was not going to work after I had already joined, so I had to take it with Nick Fury. If I hadn't already joined, I probably would have just swapped Reed out on my team for an actual counter to this Mephisto, but it's perfectly fine with Nick anyway. It's just going to be a little bit sketch trying to keep attention to the orange incineration. Basically, just want to bait his L1 and do Nick things to end the fight relatively quickly. We're trying to keep the Reed debuffs up as much as we can here. Because if you can keep the read debuffs going, you're just gonna have, you know, a little bit less annoying of a time with the Aura of Incineration, less chance for Mephisto to get L2s thrown, less chance for the fight to get out of control. So, yeah, and here we activate the internal bleed. This is so we can start doing late bleeds without them turning into the internal bleed. And yeah, I'm keeping the fight under control mostly. I'm taking it very slow. In general, against Mephy, it is just best to take the fight slow if you're not using an actual counter, just so it doesn't get out of control. And yeah, as you can see, we're gonna avoid entering the second life, and that was all that I needed to do for this fight. So yeah, not a good counter by any means, but a counter that definitely works. So yeah. And then we have Scorpion on node 55. This fight is really easy. I've taken it a couple times before. I think I took it once last season on video. But yeah, your goal is to just do two light combos, and then a normal 5-hit combo into an L1. And that will stop the first evade, and you will end the fight before the second evade has a chance to activate. And here, he's being really passive, and we had some issues at the start with him doing weird AI stuff, so the timing was a little bit tight for removing the evade, but as you can see, we still do remove the evade. If he does get the evade, it's not a big deal because we do have our second life available. So yeah, the fight's just over with that L1. It lets the bleed run its duration, and yeah, that is all for this war video. Thank you to my Patreon supporters, and you're done.